Okay, so the topic that I'm talking about is women and Tsitsit, Tallit, and I think for our program I titled it, Why Aren't Women Obligated in Tsitsit? Because I think it's actually not an easy question to answer, as we'll see. The origin of my writing this and putting these sources together and thinking about this, I participate in a partnership minyan in my home area in Bala-Cynwyd outside of Philadelphia. And the president of the shul asked me to write something to explain about women and Tsitsit, to discuss whether women were welcome to do so in our minyan, etc. And so I set out to research that. As it happened, I thought I was going to be putting together a relatively simple source sheet showing that women are not obligated, but that women are permitted to do mitzvot to which they are not obligated. But as I looked further, it's actually a little bit more interesting a question of how it developed that women are not obligated to do tzitzit. And source one is going to really jump out at us to ask some of those questions. It's a source from Sifrei. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael v'amart alehem v'asu lehem tzitzit. God says to the children of Israel, God says to Moshe to speak to the children of Israel and tell them to make tzitzit. And the Sifrei somewhat matter-of-factly says, af hanashim b'mashma. Presumably this would include women. Why wouldn't it? Just kind of a matter-of-fact statement. To which we are told, Rabbi Shimon poter et hanashim min hatzitzit mipenei shemitzvat aseh shehazaman grama nashim peturot. That Rabbi Shimon exempts women from tzitzit because women are exempt from time-bound or time-dependent mitzvot. And we'll spend a lot of time discussing what means this, that this is a time-bound mitzvah, and why that might exempt women from tzitzit. I should mention, I did want to mention at the outset, I'm happy to be interactive, so if people have questions, please feel free to jump in. I reserve the right either to answer them immediately or to delay them till later as appropriate.
Or to be evasive.
I certainly reserve the right to be evasive.
Without saying what that might say.
Right, exactly. Okay, so far we have the majority opinion, it would seem, is that women are obligated but to wear tzitzit, but Rabbi Shimon says they're not because it's a time-bound mitzvah. And then we have another opinion mentioned after a bit of discussion, which I'm not sure exactly how to understand. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Omer, Biyichud bitelu chachamim et haredir shel isha min hatzitzit, velo chayavu batalit, ela mipenei shepa'amim sheba'alah mitkasaba. So he seems to say that the rabbis only exempted or nullified a woman's veil from tzitzit, but as to a woman's tallit, a woman's cloak, a regular garment, that will be that the rabbis kept being obligated because her husband might wear that garment. We have to spend a little bit of time thinking about a lot of the discussion of the obligation of tzitzit devolves largely on what is the nature of the garment. And there's lots of discussion. I don't want to get too much into the pilpul of it about the difference of the obligation of the individual versus the obligation of the garment. And there were some opinions, I believe Beit Shammai, for instance, held that a garment that was in your closet required tzitzit. that it's totally a matter of the garment has to have the tzitzit, but it seems to me, even for those who say that the garment, the obligation falls on when a person, whoever that person may be, is wearing the tzitzit, there's still a lot of the analysis of what requires tzitzit revolves around the nature of the garment. And it's not clear to me if this opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, if he is agreeing with Rabbi Shimon and kind of explaining Rabbi Shimon, or giving a slightly different interpretation. But I believe what he's saying is that effectively something that is really a woman's garment, that only a woman would wear, is exempt from tzitzit, presumably because it is a time-bound mitzvah, and so if it's a woman's garment, it doesn't require tzitzit because it's a time-bound mitzvah. But something that might be worn by her husband, or perhaps by other men, since it's ambidextrous enough to be worn by men at times, that garment does require tzitzit. Then we have there's more discussion that I've kind of skipped over. I do have in the appendix the full pericope from Sifrei. But at the end, we're told, and this will also become important in Talmud Yerushalmi, we'll see, Shomea ani af kesut laila b'mashma. I would hear from just being told, wear tzitzit, that it would include even kesut laila, which I'm going to translate as night clothing. We will discuss there's different interpretations of what night clothing means. I'll lay out briefly. I have a section on this. Some people say that night clothing means anything that is usually worn at night. So, for instance, say pajamas would be kesut laila, right? Right, I suppose. Versus something that would be worn during the day, a suit, we'll say, if it had four corners, etc. So some people say kesut laila means anything worn at night, and some people will argue that in order for something not to be kesut laila, it needs to be both worn during the day, and it needs to be something that is regularly worn during the day. So that if you were wearing pajamas during the day, it would not require tzitzit because it's kesut laila. And similarly, if you were wearing your suit at night, it would not be obligated in tzitzit because it is because it's the nighttime. So there are different interpretations of that.
A day garment worn at nighttime
would not require tzitzit according to those opinions. And
hard to imagine that there's
in a way, you say it's hard to imagine, but if you disagreed with that and you said something that's a day garment that you wore in a night would be obligated in tzitzit, wouldn't you make a bracha on putting on those tzitzit at night?
That's shifting. That's a shift.
Right. Well, it actually isn't. The reason why we don't make a bracha on tzitzit at night generally is out of respect to those opinions, such as Rambam, that say that anything worn at night is not obligated in tzitzit. That's the basis for it. So there are some different opinions, and it as I discuss more in section 2, it's not really clear. Although I think there's some valence to say that the plain meaning of kesut laila, it seems to me, is about a garment that is designated, that is a common night clothing like pajamas. And I think that's what the Sifrei seems to be saying, and a number of people do point to the Sifrei as kind of pointing to that direction, but as I mentioned, Rambam reads differently. Rashi in different commentaries explains kesut laila in different ways, so it's not entirely easy to know. So anyway, so the Sifrei says, Shomea ani af kesut laila b'mashma, so I would hear that even night clothing is included in the obligation of tzitzit. Talmud lomar ureitem oto. Therefore it says with regards to the tchelet, you shall see it. b'yom velo balayla, which means during the day and not at night. So I think we're all vaguely familiar with that midrash, although it's a little bit more complicated to understand than you might think. So then the Sifrei tells us, V'im hayata miyucheret leyom ulelayla tehei chayevet. But if it's a garment that is designated both for night and the day, it's something that's kind of ambidextrous, which is interesting. Nowadays, you see people going out in pajamas during the day. Might that change the reality? Of course, the average pajama pant isn't four-cornered, but I'm using that kind of as the thought experiment. So it's interesting that, so we're being told here that if a garment is ambidextrous, then it requires Tsitsit, but if it's something that is worn exclusively at night, then it does not require Tsitsit. Slight ambiguity, what if you wear it during the day? I think the plain meaning here is that if you wore that, by happenstance during the day, it would be ksut laila, and it would therefore be exempt. But there are different opinions out there. So what we see in this Sifrei is the main opinion seems to be that women are included in the obligation of Tsitsit, and that Rabbi Shimon is his own opinion that exempts them, perhaps with Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava either in between those opinions or explaining Rabbi Shimon's opinion. But the main opinion seems to obligate women in Tsitsit. And if you want to go to the polar opposite, we're going to see some indications that perhaps some did not see women as obligated, but the polar opposite would be to say that women are forbidden from wearing tzitzit. And there is one source for that, which is Targum Yonatan on the pasuk in Dvarim. The pasuk in Dvarim says, "Lo yihya kli gever al isha," etc. That a man's clothing should not be worn by a woman. And if you see the Targum source 3, it reads it, "Lo yihya guyan ditzitzit utfilin dihinun tikune gavar al ita," that adornments of men such as tzitzit and tefillin should not be worn by a woman. This is just worth noting in contradiction to the Talmud in Eruvin that reports that Michal bat Shaul wore tefillin and that the rabbis did not prevent her from doing so.
We can't seem to agree on what are adornments for men, referencing that previous Gemara.
It all comes together. So that's at least to be fair. I needed to play in that source as the one source that says women are forbidden from wearing tzitzit. Next source we have is the Mishnah in Kiddushin. V'chol mitzvah taseh shehazman grama anashim chayavim v'nashim p'turot. This is the general rule that we know, that time-dependent mitzvot women are exempted from, and mitzvot that are not time-dependent women are obligated on. So, of course, the question becomes, which is which? And in the Talmud Bavli, we have Teno Rabbanan, Ezohi mitzvah taseh shehazman grama, sukkah, lulav, shofar, v'tzitzit. It counts tzitzit, at least in this text, as one of the time-dependent mitzvot. Why do I say at least in this text? Because if you see in footnote 4, Rav Lieberman in Tosefet Shuta, the Ran on Kiddushin, notes that there are some girsaot of the Talmud Bavli that either don't have tzitzit listed here or have it listed among the mitzvot that are not time dependent. So perhaps this text in Kiddushin might not be as dispositive as we might hope, especially considering we're going to see just about the same Braita in the Yerushalmi going the opposite way, and very clearly going in the opposite way. So there is the possibility that the Bavli decided that tzitzit is mitzvah taseh shehazman grama, and therefore presents the Braita that way. There's the possibility that the later understandings became that women were exempted from Tsitsit, that it was time-bound, and that perhaps this Braita got corrected to that new understanding. So it's really not entirely clear, although certainly some of the poskim do point towards this Braita as being the dispositive text that tells us that women are exempted from Tsitsit. So I think actually this next Yerushalmi is probably one of the more interesting texts that we have here, and it's from the Yerushalmi in Kiddushin, commenting on the same Mishnah. What does it say? Ezo hi mitzvah asher shazman grama kegon sukkah v'shofar lulav utfilin. So sukkah, shofar, lulav, and tefillin are counted as time-dependent mitzvot. Ezo hi mitzvah asher shelo azman grama kegon aveda v'shiluach hakan uma'akav v'tzitzit. So here tzitzit is counted as one of the mitzvot that are not time-dependent. So Rabbi Shimon poter hanashim min hatzitzit shehu mitzvat aseh shehazman grama. Rabbi Shimon exempts women from tzitzit because it is a time-dependent mitzvah. So this very much like the Sifrei indicates the majority opinion among the Tanaim was that women were obligated in tzitzit, and that Rabbi Shimon is a minority opinion saying that women are not obligated in tzitzit. Okay, but what's very, very interesting about this is the next part, which perhaps gives us some hints about the meaning of Ksut Laila, but also what it means when we say what it means when someone says that tzitzit is a time-dependent mitzvah, according to him. Amar lahem Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon said to them, presumably his compatriots who said that women are obligated in tzitzit, that it's not time-dependent. Ein atem modin li shehi mitzvat aseh shehazman grama shahare kesut laila patur min hatzitzit. So he says to them, wait, don't you agree with me that tzitzit is a time-dependent mitzvah? Because night clothing is exempt from tzitzit. Very importantly, it seems to me, we are being told that Rabbi Shimon believes that his compatriots agree that Kesut Laila is exempt from tzitzit. And so he goes to him, well, if you agree with that, shouldn't you agree with me that women are exempt? So, but apparently, obviously, they don't. And so we're told, Amar Rabbi Hila, says Rabbi Hila, Ta'amun de Rabbanan, shechein im hayu miyuchadot lo leyom ulelayla, shehi chayevet batzitzit. This is the halakhah we saw in the Sifrei earlier. They say, no. If something is a clothing that is ambidextrous, that is designated for both day and night wearing, that it is obligated for tzitzit, and therefore, it seems, that does not qualify as a time-dependent mitzvah. And therefore, women are obligated. Now, let's take a look at the next source, and we'll see something that I think is a very interesting distinction between the Bavli and I should say this piece of Bavli and the Yerushalmi. Okay, so in Menachot 43a, and a little snippet of it goes on to be, Tano Rabbanan, Hakol Chayavin Batzitzit, Kohanim, Leviim, V'Yisraelim, Gerim, Nashim, Va'avadim. The rabbis taught everyone is obligated in tzitzit, Kohens, Levis, Israelites, converts, women, and slaves. Note the main opinion of this Baraita is, like most of the Braitot we've seen already, says that women are obligated in tzitzit. Rabbi Shimon poter benashim mipnei shemitzvat asher shehazman gramahu. but Rabbi Shimon exempts women because it is a time-dependent mitzvah. They call mitzvah zman grana nashim peturot, and women are exempt from all time-dependent mitzvot. Okay, so this is sets up the same machloket we've seen already. Majority saying women are obligated. Rabbi Shimon saying no, it's a time-dependent mitzvah, and therefore women are exempt. So here's what's very interesting. Says the Talmud, "My ta'ama de Rabbi Shimon." What is the reason of Rabbi Shimon? So in other words, why does he say they're exempt? Why is it a time-dependent mitzvah? De Tanya, because it's taught, "Ureitem oto prat lichsut laila," because it says you shall see it, which exempts night clothing. And later on, I have in the appendix, I have the full text of this Gemara in Menachot, but what's significant for our purposes at the moment, it later on goes to say, "V'Rabbanan, hai ureitem oto mai avdele." What do the rabbis do with ureitem oto? And they go on to give different midrash on the words ureitem oto on behalf of the chachamim who disagree with Rabbi Shimon. And so what this means is that at least in this piece of Bavli, they presume that Rabbi Shimon's compatriots do not agree with prat liksut laila. They say, no, ureitem oto, we don't read that. We say that all clothing, day clothing or night clothing, is exempted. That seems to be the presumption in this Talmud Bavli, and that the difference between Rabbi Shimon and his compatriots is on whether ksut laila is exempted. Whereas in the Yerushalmi, we heard pretty much out of the horse's mouth. We heard from Rabbi Shimon that he believed his compatriots agreed that ksut laila was exempted. And the only question was, do the details of prat liksut laila make it into a time-dependent mitzvah? So this is, to my mind, a kind of very interesting distinction between the Bavli and Yerushalmi, and I have found remarkably little ink spilled on this difference. And I'll discuss a little bit later why I think it could be, should be remarkably significant in some ways. Really, the only things I found is one shiur of Soloveitchik about it that is quite complex, and one Rashba. And it's a tshuva of Rashba. It's actually quite interesting because someone writes to the Rashba and says, you know, the Bavli gets into this question, what do the rabbis do with ksut laila? And if you read the Yerushalmi, it looks like the rabbis agree that ksut laila is exempt. Why didn't the Bavli answer that way? To which Rashba says, well, you could ask me the same. Why didn't the Yerushalmi answer the way the Bavli says it? And he says, and listen, sometimes the Bavli and Yerushalmi disagree about things. And he goes on to say something even more heretical. He says, and sometimes this sugya of Bavli disagrees with that sugya of Bavli. So no, they had different ideas and different conclusions. In some ways, I was very excited to find this Rashba. In some ways, I was very disappointed that he didn't go farther in explanation. We'll discuss a little bit why I think some explanation would have been halakhically appreciated. Other occurrences, there are a few other occurrences of women and Tsitsit in the Talmud. In Menachot, actually a little bit before the source 7, we have Rav Yehuda Rami Techilta Leporzama Di'inshi Beite, that Rav Yehuda would put Tsitsit on the clothing of women of his house. Umevarech kol tzafra lihitatef batzitzit. But every morning he would say lihitatef batzitzit. Miderame kasavar mitzvat asher hazman gramahu. So if they say, from the fact that he shelo hazman gramahu. So the Bavli says, well, obviously if he had women wearing tzitzit, he must have thought it was not a time-bound mitzvah. And then they get into the question of, then why was he making a bracha every morning, which they deal with in different ways. But you see Rav Yehuda, we're told, put tzitzit on women's clothing. Similarly, in Masechet Sukkah, we have Ki had Rav Amram Chasida Rama Techilta Porzama Di'in Shebete. That Rav Amram Chasida would put techelet on the aprons of the women of his house, and they're dealing with some technicalities of how to construct tzitzit properly. So we have two cases where we're told about Amoraim who had women wearing tzitzit, who clearly felt that women, it seems clearly felt that women were obligated in tzitzit. A little bit difficult to interpret because we see some people say, well, that's indicative that this was a da'at yachid, that they were in the minority and they were exceptional in doing so. But it's equally possible that these teachings were preserved in order to teach other issues about putting together tzitzit, about the bracha that was made, etc., and not necessarily to indicate that they were unique or anything like that. So it's really, to my mind, not a particularly difficult. It's not a particularly important or dispositive statement to hear that these two Amoraim put tzitzit on clothing of women. Growing up in New York, I used to watch a sportscaster named Warner Wolf.
Sure.
You remember him, and one of his lines was that, if there was a game that was going to be a blowout, well, they took a 17-point lead, and he'd say, and you could turn your sets off there, and if you turned your sets off there, you knew what the result was. So, for the moment, now that we've learned, I think, really the seminal directly related sources in the Talmud, what would you conclude if you were the posek post Bavli and you were looking at these sources and saying, are women obligated in tzitzit? Where do you think the evidence lies?
The preponderance of evidence would seem to indicate that women are obligated in tzitzit.
I tend to agree with you. Yes, I mean we have the issue with the Bavli that kind of has that one different statement. But yeah, it seems to be, for the most part, I think we can be fairly certain, at least early on, most of the Tanaitic evidence is that they're obligated. There's not too much in the Amoraic text that really tells us one way or another. But it seems you would probably make that guess. That was a wave to someone out there, right?
Yeah, the maintenance here.
Okay, very good.
And that Sifrei Dvarim is looking more and more like a Ta'ut Sofer.
Wait, the Sifrei, you mean?
Sifrei Dvarim, the Nosha, the Targum, rather.
The Targum, no, it probably was a different opinion that was out there. But it does not seem to be the dispositive opinion. But yes, it is certainly out there.
Not the main course.
Now, it will not surprise people to learn that is not the way the halakhah is generally accepted. And so I have here Rambam, who says that women that are exempt from tzitzit, but does mention significantly v'nashim v'avadim sheratzu litatef b'tzitzit mitatvin below bracha. But if they want to wear tzitzit, they can do so without a bracha, and so to any other time-dependent mitzvah, anything else that they're not obligated to, they may do so. Similarly in Beit Yosef, Maran HaMachaber tells us, "V'katav harif v'harosh hilchot tzitzit t'kayman lan k'Rabbi Shimon." So Rif, very briefly, I have Rif's text in the footnote there, and Rosh, I have his text later on, says that we accept Rabbi Shimon's opinion. V'chein tatav sham harosh b'shem Rabbeinu Tam v'hevi raya mikama duchte v'chein pasak harambam. So basically, we're told that just about everyone has this consensus that women are exempt from Tsitsit. I'd like to take things through modern times and discuss some of the practical things and discussions that go on with Tsitsit of today, and then, if we have the time, perhaps rewind to take a look at the Rosh and ask a very important, what I think is an interesting question about how we got here, so to speak. Because, as we said, it seemed like a lot of the evidence was the opposite way. So Shulchan Arukh tells us also that women are exempted from Tsitsit. And then Rav Moshe Isserles adds the following: Umikol makom im rotzin le'atfu ulevarech alav hareshut biyado kemo b'shar mitzvot shezman grama. But if women want to wear tzitzit, says Rav Moshe Isserles, they may do so, and they may make a blessing on doing so, begging the question of whether someone who is not obligated to do a mitzvah is permitted to make a bracha on the mitzvah, which the general Ashkenazi opinion is yes, general Sephardi opinion is no. Footnote 17 has a link to a more lengthy excursus I have on that issue, and Rabbi Gordon and I spoke about this yesterday, that much as I'm a Sephardi trapped in an Ashkenazi's body, I see some validity to the Ashkenazi opinion on that. So in any event, the Ramah says that women may make a bracha on wearing a tzitzit. Ach mechazeh keyohara. However, and he's probably referring to them wearing it, not just the making of the blessing, it looks haughty or arrogant for them to do so. Velakach ein lahen lilbosh tzitzit, ho'il ve'eno chovat gavra. Pirosh eno chayav liknot lo tallit kedei shit yitchayev b'tzitzit. And therefore, since it would be haughty of them to do so, they shouldn't do it, because no one's really obligated to go out and get a four-cornered garment. So for them to go out and get a four-cornered garment, dafka to do a mitzvah they're not obligated to, would in some way be gaivadik, according to Rav Moshe Isserles. I note in the footnote, in Beit Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo does mention opinions that say that for women to wear tzitzit would be yohara. He does not say that in his text of Shulchan Arukh, probably indicating that he does not agree with the opinion that it's so bad-looking for women to wear tzitzit. That's not always a smoking gun. Sometimes he leaves things out. In fact, there's a point that Ramah adds to as a gloss in another text we have below that I think he's saying exactly what Beit Yosef said in the Beit Yosef, and he's probably coming to explain and not to disagree. He's right that this is what the Shulchan Arukh, what Rav Yosef Karo held. Here, it seems to me probably Rav Yosef Karo's omission of mention of the Yohara issue is his disagreement with it. So a couple of sources that I bring in from the side to kind of analyze a little bit more about women doing mitzvot that they're not obligated to do. We kind of opened with Rav Moshe Isserles' negative comment toward them. Rabbi Meir Omer, Minayin she'afilu nochri ve'osek b'Torah shehu kohen gadol. So how do we know that even if a non-Jew studies Torah, it's like he's the kohen gadol? Talmud yomar eshe ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai. It says that a person should do them and live. It doesn't say a Jew should do it, a Kohen should do it. It says anyone should do it. So anyone is a mitzvah. Amri, ein mekabelin alehem skar kimitzuveh ve'oseh, ela kimisha eno mitzuveh ve'oseh. And then it goes in, and we won't do the rest of the text. The idea that a person who does a mitzvah that is not obligated to do that mitzvah doesn't get the same reward as one who is obligated. Chacham Sassoon once mentioned, if you read this closely, that there's an argument to be said that that's a dat yachid, and that there are clearly other opinions out there that say a person who does something that's only a reshut actually gets a greater schar. But let's leave it at the moment that this Gemara indicates a lesser schar. Beit Yosef mentions for us v'haran beperek batra de Rosh Hashanah ber sheni de Sukkah hiskim ledivrei Rabbeinu Tam de mevrachot tahan notelot alehem schar. So Rabbeinu Tam, as to one of his reasonings on why women can make a bracha on something they're not obligated to do, is because they're allowed to do it and they get a reward for doing so. The Amar Rabbi Yossi ber Rabbi Chanina, Gadol ha-mitzvah ve'oseh mimi she'eno mitzvah ve'oseh. So because we're told that one is, the one who does it because they're obligated is greater than the one who does it when they're not obligated. Umi de ka'amar gadol, and since it says greater, alma mi she'eno mitzvah ve'oseh nami yesh lo schar. Since it says that the person, it doesn't say the person who's obligated to do something is wonderful, and the person who is not obligated to and does it is trash, is nothing, is meaningless. It just says it's better if one is obligated. So, from this, Rabbeinu Tam observes, that means someone doing a mitzvah that they're not obligated to do is doing something good and gets schar, and he extrapolates from there that's a reason why they might be allowed to make a bracha on something that they are not obligated to do. Hilkach bichlal mitzvehen u'mevarchot velo temaho velo nitztavu heach yomru vetzivanu. So, and therefore, they're part of the mitzvah in a way, because they get some schar, and therefore it's not such a question, well, how can they say asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav? Well, they in fact were sanctified with this mitzvah, even if they are not obligated to do the mitzvah, they're still sanctified and they still get a schar for doing this mitzvah, and therefore that's why he holds they can make a bracha. But more importantly for us, I think, is the realization is that women who do an obligation such as Tsitsit, for which they are not obligated, are doing a mitzvah, are doing something for which they receive schar. And to my mind, that is not to be taken lightly at all. Amar Rav Yehuda, this is from Sanhedrin, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, Le'olam ya'asok adam b'torah mitzvah, afilu shelo lishma, shemitoch lishma ba lishma. So Rav Yehuda says, whenever someone does a mitzvah, let them do it even not for its sake, because from doing it not for their sake, eventually they're going to do things for the right reason. Shebishchar 42 korbanot shehikriv balak zacha v'yatza mimenu rut. And his midrash on that is that that Balak brought all those korbanot really for the purposes of cursing Bnei Yisrael, but eventually he gets rewarded from it with Ruth, who is going to do mitzvot for the right reason. I think this is a tremendously important halakhah, and tremendously important to think about when people are questioning why someone wants access to some mitzvah. Whether it's someone who's not so frum, but they want to be frum about this halakhah, or someone who's not obligated, maybe doesn't do everything, but she wants to be able to wear tallit and tefillin. And there's
implications for the putative motives of potential gerei tzedek.
Good gesagt. Absolutely. As far as the statement of Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, if someone wants to do a mitzvah, the answer pretty much should be Yasher Koach. May it be a mitzvah, may you get schar for it, and no matter what your motives might be, may eventually, even if your motives aren't the greatest, may it be for blessing.
Comes to a head with the Birkat Kohanim, where Rambam discounts the notion that you would tell somebody
not to do it
because he's not otherwise a paragon of virtue. We never say
right.
Hosef
Right. Don't exactly. If you're going to do a mitzvah, do a mitzvah. Baruch Hashem. Now, I want to make very clear. I'm not saying necessarily that I have any problem with the motives of women who say, darn it, I want to have access to this mitzvah. And some people say, oh, that's a political statement. That's a statement that they want to have access to a mitzvah, that they feel it's unfortunate and unfair that they might not have access to the mitzvah. To me, that's not so political. That is a thirst for Torah and mitzvot. And whether we hear that from someone who's the frummest yid in the world, or a person who has no connection, the answer is Baruch Hashem and Yirsha Kochacha. And that's exactly what Rav Yehuda Amoraic tells us. If someone wants to do a mitzvah, Baruch Hashem.
And indeed, we wouldn't challenge any woman who wanted to be in shul on Rosh Hashanah to hear the shofar. I can't think of anybody who would challenge the motives of such a woman, from right to left.
Right. So I have Rav Moshe Feinstein's tshuva, just a piece of it. It's much more lengthy, but it's an interesting tshuva altogether. Ibra de'ikad reshut lechol isha lekayem af hamitzvot shelo chayevatan Torah v'yesh lahem mitzvah uschar. Since women can do a mitzvah and they have reward even if they're not obligated, she'im kem gan al Tsitsit shayach li isha shetirtzeh lilbosh beged shehi b'tzura acheret mibigdei anashim ulekem mitzvah. So too, a woman can wear something with tzitzit and get a mitzvah. He seems not to really, at least, take Rav Moshe Isserlis's statement that it's Yohara too seriously. He does discuss that it should be done not for rebellious purposes. I just say, what exactly is rebellious about someone saying, I want to do a mitzvah? And he mentions also the idea that it shouldn't be, that it should be that it should be something that's particularly a feminine garment, which there's some reason as far as that. I think one could ask, since Rashi says that beged ish is when you wear it to sit among men, is that if a woman is sitting in a woman's side of mechitza wearing a tallit, or would be sitting, if it's in a mixed seating, would be sitting with men anyway, and it's not disguising gender or anything like that, I wouldn't be too worried about, to make sure that the tallit had pink in it, but, it probably can't hurt. I mentioned in a footnote further about Rabbi Feinstein's concern for rebellious nature. Rav Avadia Yosef, on similar sociological grounds, has problems with women wearing tzitzit. But to me, I think the conclusion for the moment is that women are, it's accepted that women are exempted, but that they have access to that mitzvah, that they have schar for the mitzvah, and that when people thirst for a mitzvah, that's something for the most part to be celebrated. I'm going to skip section 2 pretty much entirely. I outlined already the different opinions on exactly what Ksut Laila is, and I wonder, how much perhaps different understandings of the meaning of Ksut Laila played into the Bavli's understanding of Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim or something like that, but I have really no evidence for it. I'm interested by the fact that the Bavli assumes that Rabbi Shimon was disputing with his compatriots as to Ksut Laila, and as to whether or not Ksut Laila was exempted, when we have in the Yerushalmi Rabbi Shimon indicating his contemporaries agree with him. Not surprising, maybe the Bavli didn't have access to that Braita. Maybe they didn't. We know knowledge of Braitot was spotty, so that is possible. But it's still quite interesting. Yes.
Just a thought. I'd like to hear your thinking on it regarding the example of Balak and Ruth.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the way that could be read, and perhaps should be read, is that Balak doesn't deserve a Yashar Koach for having offered those korbanot. It's almost as though there is, excuse the expression, a magical quality about doing mitzvot, whether your intentions are good or evil.
I hear.
That ultimately it can bring to a good result, as it did in the Balak root arrangement. And so what I just wonder, I heard what you said, and there's a side of me that, truly hears it. On the other hand, in terms of applying that particular example, I'm not quite sure whether it would endorse giving a yasher koach to a person. What it is saying is, we've got faith in the power of mitzvot themselves, whether this individual is doing it for the right reason or the wrong reason, that ultimately some good may come out of it. Right. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
I hear that. Of course, I guess in some ways, the Balak example is the reductio ad absurdum. And I don't think that Rav is likely preaching to people who are on that level, so to speak. My guess is he's more preaching to the level of the people who are donating $1 million to the hospital because they want a wing named after them, or something like that. And by the way, I think it was Rav Livni I once heard speaking about this, who said, in some ways, people should give money publicly. On the one sense, maybe they're getting this notoriety, etc. On the other hand, they're letting other people know this is important to me and this is good. So it's right. So there's an interesting question as to, I think for all of us, we often want to be tsanua in our observance of mitzvot, in our doing of tzedakah, and there's certainly merit to that. But at the same time, there's some merit to being very public about the things that we do to hope to encourage others. That's kind of a side point.
By the way, just an interesting point to that, with the story of Yosef and his brothers, when it talks about Ruvain, Laman Hatzilotam, Oto Miyadam Lahashivo El Aviv. The Midrash commenting on that, I think it's a Teshuvat HaRashba, says something, if Reuven had any concept that the Torah was going to parenthetically single him out for praise, that one, Hayam Molich et Yosef al Ktefav Mevioto, and based on that is the halachic thing that if somebody wants to, the Mikan le Pirsum la Osei Mitzvot. And then Ramah, based on that, says that you can put your name on an item that you've donated to the synagogue, etc. Because again, this is nothing more than, irrespective of the donor's intention, this is simply giving positive reinforcement and positive publicity to somebody who's doing the right thing, which is what we're doing probably at any journal dinner, where it's not necessarily a blanket endorsement by that organization of what any donor may have been up to.
Right. So I guess my response is, I think you're right. The question is, and maybe there is that idea that no matter what, there's a positive. I think Rav's ultimate goal is to tell people, do mitzvot. I remember
there's a number of examples of this.
We just briefly. I remember growing up upstate New York. There was a Sunday morning radio show that was Jewish music. And the person would always sign off by saying, remember, do a mitzvah this week. It certainly can't hurt. It can only help. I always like that.
Well, if we consider the Torah Sam HaChayim, right? So theoretically, nourishing food or medication, a vitamin, medication, whatever it is, its beneficial effects are independent of your intentions. So if it's blood pressure medication, it's going to lower your blood pressure, even if that wasn't unless you do other things to sabotage its intent. But
it's a concept I think we find in general, that if you do a mitzvah, even for any positive deed, brings a scar. Like the whole thing with Eglon and Ehud, that he stood up when he heard Hashem's name. Right, and it would be an example of that. It's a similar example, and anything that somehow some good will come out of it.
Right. Ruth was his reward too.
Right. Only with Ruth.
Right. So I'm largely skipping over section 2, but I do want to mention. So there are these different concepts of what is the exemption of Kesut Laila, which has implications. In the time that we made Tsitsit out of shatnez, that you could only have the shatnez if it was bimkom mitzvah. So if it's ksut laila, you couldn't have tzitzit on it. It has implications for whether or not you make a bracha. And the conclusion in Beit Yosef, and also that Ramah mentions in the Shulchan Arukh, is that we basically err on the side of caution by not making a bracha unless it's daytime clothing and worn during the day. I actually think there's fairly strong evidence, and the Gra mentions that he's somewhat convinced by this from the Sifrei that we read, that really the halakhah should be that anything that is daytime clothing is obligated in Tsitsit, even at night. In which case you would even make a bracha on it and things like that. I'm like
at
this.
Night?
Yes, I'm this close to saying that would be like the right halakhah. The ship has sailed, and there's too much disagreement on how to understand that. That I think it's still in the safek brachot lehakel. But you can turn your sets off now world. I might well side with the Rosh and Rabbeinu Tam opinion that says that clothing designated for the day requires tzitzit even at night. The final section that I have here, which is kind of my more lamdisha thing, is I get into the fact that, as we said, a lot of the sources seem to be that Rabbi Shimon was an individual opinion exempting women, and we all of a sudden, maybe sometime during the Amoraic period, if those Amoraim that are mentioned putting tzitzit on women, if they're dat yachid, maybe it shifts then, maybe it shifts later, but at some point it becomes accepted that women are exempt. And there is very little ink spilled explaining that. We don't have a Gemara that says, V'halakhah Rabbi Shimon. We have nothing like that. And how did we get there? And the longest explanation of that conclusion is in the halachot ketonot of the Rosh, which I break down here, and we don't have the time to go through. This starts on page 7. I break down here. A lot of what he argues is that there are several Gemarot and Mishnayot. For instance, there's a Mishnah in Brachot that says that essentially comes down to the reason why the last paragraph of Kriyat Shema is the last paragraph of Kriyat Shema is because the second paragraph applies both in the day and at night, whereas the tzitzit only apply during the day. So, says Rosh, we see here that night isn't the time of tzitzit, and therefore we see that this Stam Mishnah and some Gemara that's discussed on that accepts Rabbi Shimon's position that ksut laila is exempt. Except, and they have a number of Gemaras that seem to accept the idea that ksut laila is exempt and go by all of the homiletics that gets to that position and say, therefore, it must be that Rabbi Shimon won the day. Except if we go back to that Yerushalmi and say that perhaps ksut laila was never in debate, and so that all these Gemaras, all they really say is that everyone agrees that ksut laila is exempted. And in that case, if the whole reason we're assuming that the halacha is according to Rabbi Shimon is because of all these other Gemaras that accept prat ksut laila, maybe that doesn't prove anything towards whether or not. So maybe it should be universally accepted. We accept the idea that ksut laila is exempt. No one really disagreed with it. And in that case, there would be very little evidence in favor of saying that the halacha swung consciously towards Rabbi Shimon on women and tzitzit. So I go through that. There are one or two parts that it's a little bit of my arguments maybe for why it's not a proof aren't perfectly strong. But a lot of it is like they say, oh look, this explanation of this verse is according to what Rabbi Shimon's understanding of the verse is in that Gemara in Menachot. But if that Gemara in Menachot gives that opinion exclusively as Rabbi Shimon's, because they assume that Uri'item Oto Prat Ksut Laila is not an understanding of the Chachamim. But I think that once that breaks down, the fact that some of the homiletics, some of the exegesis used in these other Gemarot is the same as Rabbi Shimon's, maybe doesn't really point us to agreement on Rabbi Shimon winning the day, especially if you consider those other Gemaras might not be making the same assumptions as the Gemara in Menachot, as I mentioned briefly in that Rashba. The Rashba does appear in my appendix. So I'm not going to go through all those proofs, but I think it's a very interesting question. I'm not here to say we should overturn the law and say that women are obligated for Tsitsit, but I think what we can say is it's somewhat surprising that the halakhah has become that they're not, that maybe it's somewhat questionable conclusion. For those who hold that women should not make brachot on mitzvot to which they are not obligated, if you're perhaps on the fence as to that halakhah, whether you agree with the more Ashkenazi or Sephardi approach, perhaps this is a katuv hashishli b'nehem. Maybe you'll say, you know what? Maybe I'll still hold that women shouldn't make a bracha on sitting in a sukkah. But since there were strong opinions that women were obligated in Tsitsit, and there isn't really great proof that halakhah should have gone in the opposite direction, maybe I'll be more comfortable with women making a bracha on Tsitsit than I might otherwise have been. If people get a chance to read through that Rosh and see if you agree. I also, by the way, at the very appendix, it didn't come through. I think you have there's a color-coded text that I have comparing. This is on page 15, comparing a Gemara in Menachot to a Gemara in Zvachim, where they have just about the same argumentations, but in different orders, and I have to go through this. I surmise that I might be up to something that might work under a Rav Halivni approach here, that both Gemarot agree that one party learns two halachot from Asher Techaseba, one of the verses on Tsitsit, and one only learned one thing, and that there was some machloket on some other point of halacha, and maybe they weren't sure exactly what that point of contention was. And if I'm right about that, then perhaps the Gemara in Zvachim does not assumes that Pratlik Sut Laila is a universally held opinion. But I really have to go through that further and see if my read holds up. But the bottom line is it's something that I started out with a relatively simple study, but I think it's a very, very interesting subject altogether, and tzarich iyun whether that Yerushalmi should reframe some of our understandings.
First of all, Yishar Kochacha, tzarich iyun, and it got it.
Amazing.
Just as an alternative katuv shlishi shiachriya benehem, the argument for a much greater latitude of women in Tzitzit. The closing, the penultimate section of Rambam's Hilchot Tzitzit. The wording to me is very suggestive. Af al pi she'en adam mechuyav liknot lo talit ulihitatef ba kedei sheyaseh ba tzitzit. First of all, the use of the word adam. Right? Ein ra'ui la'adam chasid sheyiftor atzmo mi mitzvah zo ela la'olam yishtadel liyot atuf b'chusut ha'mechuyevet b'tzitzit kedei sheyakayem mitzvah zo uvish'at hatfilah. Excuse me, kedei mitzvah zo. So what Rambam says is it ill behooves us to hide behind legalities or technicalities. You're right. On purely technical grounds, this mitzvah should have fallen by the wayside, if only because most of us would be hard-pressed to identify a four-cornered item in our wardrobe.
Really? That shirt?
Maybe a...
It's an interesting question, whether the common button-down shirt. I could identify four corners. The two collars, the opening there. It's an interesting question. Anyway,
but nobody would argue that a shirt or no.
Maybe we should. I don't know.
No,
that'll be the next study.
Well, now we know why Noach, in addition to Daniel and Eov, is the tzaddik.
So we'll start a new trend.
But the notion that it, as a general orientation,
Right.
that we shouldn't, that we look to embrace the mitzvot not as obligations to be outwitted, but as opportunities to be embraced, is the point I think that Rambam is making here. In which case, that would include women too. We shouldn't hide behind the technicalities of mitzvah seishazman grama. If somebody wants to do that, it's no different than anybody else. You know, we could hide behind how little time we could spend in the sukkah over Sukkot, or how, you know, you multiply examples. You know, we could say, listen, I said Rabbi Ishmael Omer, and I said Birkat Kohanim, and Elu Dvarim Shein Lehem Shiur. So do I really want to study any other Torah? You know, that
Yep.
kind of orientation is minimalist, and Rambam's warning us away from it.
Excellent. Rabbi Price, I got your email. Thank you for your comments. It wasn't a particular question, so I need not repeat, but just wanted to mention that's why I was looking at my phone.
So related question, though not exactly to the subject. The custom of having people not wear Tallit gadol before they're married.
Okay, so I haven't done extensive research on that. My understanding is, for the most part, that came into practice in Ashkenaz, where just, maybe as a cost-saving measure, so to speak, that they wouldn't engage in the expense of having a tallit until then. That's at least what I've seen / heard. One thing that's very, very interesting is that Mishnah Berurah raises a shry about that and says, what do you mean you're going to wait till you're married to do this mitzvah? And the Mishnah Berurah that you will speak to some people who will tell you that it is of canonical halachic status. And then you'll say to them, and is your unmarried son wearing a tallit? And they'll say no. And they'll say, I'm a big believer that the Mishnah Berurah, which has its merits as a work, certainly, that it is viewed as canonical not because his arguments or statements were convincing, but just because most often his statements are consistent with what people were already doing. But on the rare but not unheard of occasions where he said, you know what we're doing ain't right, he's not so canonical. And you see that, with Rav Moshe Isserlis as well. Rabbi Alan Uter tells a story of Rabbi Josh Uter asking one of the Rosh Yeshiva at YU, when do we follow the Ramah and when don't we? And the answer was, we do when we do, and we don't when we don't. And so that's very
Rabbi Uter has a halakhah to his own story too.
Right. So that's sometimes, very often, canonicity is more a function of. That means no one's on the line. Let me just hang up for the moment. I'll call back later. When oftentimes things become canonical because they reflect what people are doing, not because people are saying we're always going to follow this. And ironically, there are a number of times that Ramah says things that I'm convinced by over Rav Moshe Isserlis, and they tend to be the ones on which Ashkenazim don't listen to. So Ramah, for instance, holds that tefillin should be worn on Chol HaMoed. And now Ashkenazim more tend to not. But similarly, on Ramah holds that you don't need to keep your head covered. That it's a midat chasidut to do so, but it's not halakhically required. People tend to kind of ignore that.
By the way, this was the proof, the spoof text. Gdilim ta'aseh lecha al arba kanfot ksutcha asher techaseh ba, and the very next pasuk ki kaf ish isha. Right.
Maharil said it.
What?
Maharil said it.
Yeah, Maharil. Okay. But again, so that's the folk etymology. Normally we wouldn't do that. By the way, I know Rabbi Uter once made, he would make a serious point, but in his jesting way, that he says that the only practice he's retained from his RA days is not wearing wearing Tsitsit on Shabbat.
All right.
Does that remember?
So
In other words, do you remember what his reasoning was for that?
Yes, if you read Shulchan Arukh, if the beged is not of sufficient size to be mechuyav in Tsitsit, it becomes a masoi, and therefore wearing a talit katan on Shabbat is halakhically problematic. Now, for those who accept eruv, less so. For Rabbi Yuder, more so. But that's basically the what's going on there.
Unless it's a big talit katan.
Right. Okay. All right. So thank you everyone for listening. If as you look through the sources further, if you care to, I'd be happy to take more comment and sharpen some of the arguments.
Seriously.